April 9th, 1940, the darkest dawn in Norway's history. While Oslo slept, the wolves arrived. German warships slid like shadows into the Oslo fjord. Paratroopers seized airfields. Troops stormed the docks. By sunrise, the unthinkable had happened. Norway was under attack. The government, the king, the very soul of the nation, all were in peril. But Norway would not fall without a fight. At Drobak Sound, aging coastal defenders fired a salvo that shook the world. The mighty Blücher, pride of the Kriegsmarine, shuddered under the blows. Flames licked the sky. The ship listed, then vanished beneath the waves. That single act of defiance bought Norway's leaders precious hours. Hours that would change everything. Chaos gripped the capital. At Østbanen, an emergency train stood ready. Aboard it, King Haakon VII, Crown Prince Olav, Prime Minister Nybergsund, his cabinet, the last free government of Norway. The whistle blew, the wheels turned. As the train lurched north, German boots already echoed in the streets behind them. They raced toward Hamar, then Elverum, small towns where hope still flickered. But the Germans pursued them. 100 elite troops sped north in trucks, under orders to capture the king at any cost. Norway's fate teetered on a knife's edge. And then, a twist of fate. Near Hamar, a 24-year-old private chauffeur named Finn Bjertnes was stopped at gunpoint. He worked for a wealthy family, but war cares little for social standing. The government commandeered his car, not for the king, but for Trygve Lie, the future architect of the United Nations. Through the night they drove, evading German patrols. No reward awaited Finn, just a handshake and a spare suit from Lee's own wardrobe. A small kindness in a world unraveling. History forgets such men, but without them, the king's no might never have been spoken. April 10th, 3 a.m., near Elverum, 200 elite German paratroopers roared north in commandeered trucks. Hitler's best, armed with machine guns and grenades. Their mission? Capture the king at any cost. Against them, 30 boys and farmers, military cadets from Elverum, weekend hunters clutching deer rifles. Led by Captain Holter, they had one ancient machine gun and unshakable resolve. The Germans arrived like a steel fist, motorcycles, trucks, automatic weapons blazing. But in those dark woods, numbers meant nothing. The Norwegians knew every tree, every shadow. For 2 hours they fought. German discipline met Norwegian desperation. When dawn broke, the elite paratroopers retreated, bloodied, shocked, defeated by farmers with hunting rifles. King Haakon, sheltering miles away in Elverum's folk high school, was safe. 30 ordinary Norwegians had stopped Hitler's best. The message was clear: this would not be an easy conquest. Hitler's envoy, Kurt Breuer, delivered his demands with Prussian precision. Total surrender. The appointment of Vidkun Quisling, the traitor who had seized Oslo's radio at dawn, declaring himself Norway's new leader. But there was more. The Germans needed legitimacy. They needed the king's signature, his royal seal. Your Majesty should follow the wise example of your brother-in-law, King Christian of Denmark. He saw reason. He spared his people unnecessary suffering. The irony was crushing. For 35 years, King Haakon had been a constitutional monarch, a figurehead with ceremonial duties. He cut ribbons, attended state dinners, gave speeches. Real power belonged to the democratically elected government. He had sworn an oath to that principle when he took Norway's crown in 1905. I swear to rule according to the Constitution and the laws of the realm. But now in this cramped schoolroom in Elverum, this ceremonial king faced the most consequential decision in Norwegian history. Hitler's war machine demanded his blessing for a puppet regime. Without it, Quisling was just another traitor screaming into a radio. With it, Nazi rule would carry the legitimacy of Norway's crown. The Führer requires an answer, Your Majesty. Tonight, King Haakon, I must consult my government. That night, in a tiny boarding house in Nybergsund, history turned. 20 men who had fled their capital, who commanded no armies, who controlled no territory, sat around a wooden table, and at their head, a king whose power existed only on paper. They all knew the stakes. Denmark had fallen in hours. Holland would surrender in days. France herself would crumble within weeks. The Wehrmacht was unstoppable. Resistance seemed futile. Perhaps accommodation is possible. Perhaps we can negotiate. King Haakon building intensity. Gentlemen, I will not appoint Vidkun Quisling as Prime Minister of Norway. The people despise him as a traitor. If this government accepts the German ultimatum, if you choose to bow before Hitler's demands, then I will abdicate. I will not legitimize Norway's enslavement. For 35 years, I have been your constitutional monarch. But tonight, I speak as a Norwegian. And this Norwegian says no. Nybergsund, Your Majesty, we are in complete agreement. Norway will not surrender. We will not collaborate. We will resist. At midnight, the resolution was signed, a single page of defiance that declared Norway would rather die than kneel. Foreign Minister Coates' pen scratched across the paper. The government unanimously advises His Majesty not to appoint Quisling as Prime Minister. It was the most important document in Norwegian history, written not by generals or diplomats, but by refugees huddled in a country boarding house, signed not by conquerors, but by the conquered who refused to be conquered. Hitler's rage was swift and terrible. The Führer had expected easy compliance. After all, what could a powerless constitutional monarch do against the might of the Third Reich? But this ceremonial king had done the unthinkable. He had said no, and that single word, spoken by a man who supposedly had no power, had just declared war on Nazi Germany. Bombs fell like hail, houses exploded. The boarding house where the king had made his fateful decision was reduced to splinters. Miraculously, the king and crown prince survived, fleeing into the woods just minutes before the bombs fell. 35 innocent civilians did not. Elverum burned. But the message was clear. Norway would bleed, but it would not kneel. North they fled. Tromsø, then London by Royal Navy destroyer. Quisling's radio broadcast sneered from Oslo. The coward king has abandoned you, but the puppet's words rang hollow. For 5 years, from a modest house in London, the powerless king proved that moral authority transcends military might. His voice crackled across the static to occupied Norway. The battle for our freedom continues. What we have lost in battle, we shall reclaim in freedom. That no in Nybergsund had lit a fire that the Wehrmacht could never extinguish. Norway became Hitler's zone of destiny, a bleeding wound that required 400,000 German troops to suppress. Troops desperately needed on other fronts. When peace came, the ledger was balanced. Quisling, the would-be puppet king, faced a firing squad at Akershus fortress, executed for high treason in the same fort where he had once plotted Norway's surrender. The king returned to a nation rebuilt, not by collaborators, but by patriots who remembered that April night when a ceremonial monarch found the power to say no to evil itself. Today, the Kongens Nei rests in the National Archives, a single page, as fragile as the moment it was written. 23 lines of text that saved a nation's soul. No grand speeches, no armies, no treaties, just a king who discovered that real power doesn't come from crowns or constitutions. It comes from the courage to say no when saying yes would be easier. History teaches us that sometimes the most powerless among us wield the greatest power of all, the power of moral choice. On April 10, 1940, in a freezing boarding house in Nybergsund, a constitutional monarch who commanded no armies and controlled no territory made a choice that echoed around the world. Some choices echo forever. Some no's change the world.